It was early in the morning when Elena Carter woke up. She stretched lazily, feeling grateful for the calmness of the day ahead. It was one of those rare mornings where everything seemed perfect. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Birds chirped softly outside and the air smelled fresh. For once, life felt simple. Elena lived in a small suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was home, a place where she could raise her kids safely. Her husband, Marcus, worked as a U.S. Marshal stationed out of state, so she often handled things alone. But that didn't bother her. She was strong and independent, always making sure her children were happy and cared for. Today was no different. After getting dressed, Elena walked into the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Her two kids, 8-year-old Mia and 6-year-old Noah, sat at the table chatting excitedly about their plans for the day. They talked about going to the park later if the weather stayed nice. Elena smiled as she listened to them. Their laughter filled the room, warming her heart. But then, there was a loud knock at the door. It startled everyone. Elena turned off the stove and wiped her hands on a towel before heading toward the entrance. When she opened the door, she saw Officer Greg Parker standing there. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a stern expression. His uniform made him look official, but something about his demeanor felt off. "Good morning," Elena said politely, trying to keep her tone friendly despite the unexpected visit. "Can I help you?" Officer Parker didn't smile or return the greeting. Instead, he glared at her. "You parked illegally," he snapped, pointing toward the street. "That's your car, isn't it?" Elena blinked, confused. She stepped outside and looked at her vehicle. It was parked neatly along the curb, well within the designated lines. There was plenty of space for other cars to pass by without any issues. She frowned slightly, wondering if this was some kind of mistake. "I'm sorry, sir," she replied calmly, "but my car is parked correctly. I double-checked it last night." Parker's jaw tightened. He didn't like being questioned. "Don't argue with me," he said sharply. "I know what I see. You're blocking traffic." Elena shook her head gently. "No, sir, I'm not. See for yourself, it's inside the lines." For a moment, Parker hesitated. He glanced at the car, then back at her. His eyes narrowed as though he were searching for a reason to stay angry. Then suddenly his voice grew louder. "Are you calling me a liar?" he demanded. "No, I'm not," Elena answered quickly, raising her hand slightly to show she meant no harm. "I'm just saying—" Before she could finish, Parker took a step forward. Without warning, he grabbed her arm roughly and yanked her closer. Shocked and frightened, Elena tried to pull away, but his grip was too strong. Pain shot through her shoulder as he twisted her arm behind her back. "What are you doing?" she cried out, panic rising in her voice. Inside the house, Mia and Noah watched from the window, their eyes wide with terror. Tears streamed down Mia's cheeks as she clutched her brother tightly. "You think you can break the rules and get away with it?" Parker growled, ignoring her pleas. "People like you always cause trouble." The words hit Elena like a punch to the gut. "People like you." She understood immediately what he meant. This wasn't about parking at all. It was about the color of her skin. Anger bubbled inside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Fighting back would only make things worse. "Please let me go," she begged, her voice trembling. "I haven't done anything wrong." Reluctantly, Parker released her after a few more seconds. He shoved her lightly, causing her to stumble backward. She caught herself against the door frame, her heart racing. She wanted to scream, to call for help, but she knew better than to provoke him further. Instead, she stood there silently, clutching her arm as he stormed off. Once he was gone, Elena closed the door and locked it securely. Her whole body shook as she leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths to steady herself. The pain in her arm throbbed, but it was nothing compared to the hurt she felt inside. How could someone treat her like that? What had she done to deserve such cruelty? Mia and Noah ran to her side, hugging her tightly. "Mommy, are you okay?" Mia asked, her voice breaking. Elena forced a weak smile. "I'm fine, sweetie," she whispered, running her fingers through her daughter's hair. "Everything will be okay." but deep down, she wasn't sure if that was true. Later that afternoon, Elena decided to file a formal complaint with the local police department. She called a friend who worked as a lawyer and explained what had happened. Her friend advised her to document everything carefully, including taking photos of her injuries and collecting witness statements from neighbors. When Elena arrived at the station, she felt nervous but determined. She recounted the incident to the desk sergeant, showing him pictures of her bruised arm and providing details about how Officer Parker had treated her. To her relief, the sergeant promised to investigate the matter thoroughly. However, as days passed, it became clear that nothing would come of her complaint. The department dragged its feet, refusing to take action against Parker. Neighbors who had witnessed the altercation backed away, too afraid to speak up. Even Elena's lawyer admitted that fighting the system would be an uphill battle. Feeling defeated, Elena confided in her husband, Marcus, during one of their nightly phone calls. At first, she hesitated to tell him everything, fearing it might distract him from his work, but Marcus sensed something was wrong. "Elena, talk to me," he urged gently. "What's going on?" Finally, she broke down and told him the truth. As she spoke, Marcus listened quietly, his grip tightening around the phone. By the time she finished, his blood was boiling. No one messed with his family, not like this. "I'll be home soon," he said firmly. "We'll figure this out together." True to his word, Marcus returned home the next day. When he saw the bruises on Elena's arm, his anger reached new heights. But more than anything, he felt a deep sense of failure. As a U.S. Marshal, he had sworn to uphold justice, yet here was his own wife, victimized by the very system he served. Determined to protect his family and hold Parker accountable, Marcus began planning his next move. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew he couldn't stand idly by. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about sending a message. If the system wouldn't deliver justice, he would find another way, and nothing, not even the weight of the entire establishment, would stop him. When Marcus arrived home, he was greeted by a mix of emotions: relief from Elena that he was finally there, sadness over what had happened, and fear about what might come next. The house felt different now, as though the calmness they once cherished had been replaced by an invisible storm. Marcus hugged Elena tightly, holding her as if to shield her from all the pain she had endured. He knelt down to speak with Mia and Noah, reassuring them that everything would be okay. But deep inside, Marcus knew this wasn't going to be easy. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, Marcus and Elena sat together at the dining table. Spread out before them were documents, photographs, and notes Elena had gathered since the incident. There were pictures of her bruised arm, copies of witness statements, and even grainy security footage from a neighbor's camera showing Officer Parker yelling and grabbing her. Marcus studied each piece carefully, his jaw tightening with every detail. "This guy thinks he can get away with anything," Marcus muttered under his breath. "But not this time." Elena sighed, rubbing her temples. "I already filed a complaint, but nothing's happening. They're protecting him." Marcus nodded grimly. He understood how these systems worked. As a U.S. Marshal, he had seen firsthand how power could corrupt and how those in authority often protected their own. But this wasn't just another case, it was personal. This was his wife, his family, and he wasn't about to let anyone trample over them. "We need evidence," Marcus said firmly. "Something undeniable. Something that will force them to act." Over the next few days, Marcus threw himself into uncovering the truth. He reached out to trusted contacts within law enforcement, people who respected him and believed in justice. One of them was Daniel Hayes, a retired detective who had worked alongside Marcus on several cases. Daniel agreed to help, digging through old records and databases to find information about Officer Parker. What they discovered shocked even Marcus. Officer Greg Parker had a long history of misconduct complaints, most of which involved minority residents. There were accusations of excessive force, racial profiling, and verbal abuse. Yet none of these cases had ever led to disciplinary action. Each time Parker walked away unscathed, thanks to higher-ups who swept everything under the rug. "He's untouchable," Daniel explained during one of their meetings. The department doesn't want bad publicity, so they bury these incidents. But we can't let him keep doing this, Marcus replied, his voice firm. If we don't stop him, he'll hurt someone else. While Marcus focused on gathering evidence, Elena began sharing her story with others. She spoke to neighbors, friends, and local activists, hoping to raise awareness about what had happened. Many were sympathetic, but some warned her to stay quiet, fearing retaliation. Still, Elena refused to back down. She wanted justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered because of men like Parker. One person who took particular interest in Elena's case was Rachel Monroe, a journalist known for exposing corruption in government institutions. Rachel had heard whispers about Parker's behavior and saw Elena's story as an opportunity to shine a light on systemic issues plaguing law enforcement. After meeting with Elena and Marcus, she decided to write a series of articles detailing the incident and its aftermath. Rachel's first article appeared online a week later. Titled, "The Assault That Was Ignored," it quickly gained traction, sparking outrage across social media platforms. Readers shared stories of similar experiences, flooding comment sections with demands for accountability. Local news outlets picked up the story, amplifying the call for justice. For the first time, Elena felt like people were listening. Despite the growing attention, the police department remained silent. Officials refused to comment publicly, claiming investigations were ongoing. Behind closed doors, however, tensions simmered. Officers loyal to Parker dismissed the accusations as exaggerations, while others quietly expressed concern about potential fallout. Meanwhile, Marcus continued piecing together his case. With Daniel's help, he obtained internal memos and emails, revealing how senior officers had actively suppressed complaints against Parker. These documents painted a damning picture of institutional negligence and complicity. Knowing they couldn't rely solely on traditional channels, Marcus and his team devised a bold plan. They decided to leak the evidence directly to federal authorities, bypassing local law enforcement entirely. It was risky. Doing so could jeopardize Marcus's career, but he didn't care. Protecting his family mattered more than any job title or badge. To ensure maximum impact, Rachel coordinated with Marcus to release the leaked documents alongside her second article. Titled "The System That Failed Us," the piece exposed decades of unchecked misconduct within the department. Names were named, dates provided, and connections laid bare. The public reaction was explosive. Protests erupted outside the police station, with hundreds demanding answers. Community leaders called for immediate reforms while politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Even national figures weighed in, condemning the blatant disregard for justice. Amid the chaos, Marcus watched silently from the sidelines. He hadn't sought fame or recognition. He simply wanted accountability. Now, as the nation turned its gaze toward his small suburban town, he hoped the pressure would force real change. But the fight wasn't without consequences. Threats poured in daily. Voicemails, texts, even anonymous letters left on their doorstep. Some accused Marcus of betraying his fellow officers. Others vowed revenge. Despite the danger, Marcus refused to back down. He installed extra locks on the doors and taught Elena self-defense techniques, determined to keep his family safe. At the same time, guilt gnawed at him. He hated involving Elena and the kids in something so dangerous. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, Marcus often found himself staring out the window, wondering if he'd made the right choice. Was this path worth the cost? One evening, as he wrestled with these thoughts, Elena joined him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "For us, for everyone." Marcus looked at her, seeing the strength and resilience that had always inspired him. He nodded slowly, drawing comfort from her words. Together, they stood united, a family fighting for justice no matter the odds. As weeks passed, the momentum only grew stronger. Federal investigators descended upon the town, launching inquiries into both Officer Parker and the department's leadership. Arrest warrants were issued, and high-ranking officials resigned amid mounting scrutiny. Though the process was slow and fraught with resistance, progress was undeniable. Through it all, Marcus never lost sight of why he started this journey. It wasn't about vengeance or glory. It was about ensuring that no one else would have to endure what Elena did. And as he held his wife and children close, watching the sunrise paint the sky anew, he allowed himself a moment of hope. Change was possible. Justice could prevail. All it took was courage and the willingness to stand up when others stayed silent. As the weeks went by, Marcus became more determined than ever to bring Officer Parker and those protecting him to justice. The public outrage had grown louder, but Marcus knew that exposing the truth wasn't enough. He needed proof, undeniable evidence, that would force the system to act. And so, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Working closely with Daniel Hayes, Marcus began planning a risky operation. They learned that senior officers often held private meetings in a secluded room at the police station to discuss sensitive cases. These gatherings were informal and off the record, making them perfect opportunities to gather incriminating information. If Marcus could infiltrate one of these meetings, he might uncover something big, something that could not be ignored. Late one evening, Marcus and Daniel arrived near the police station, staying hidden in the shadows of a nearby alley. The plan was simple yet dangerous. Using a tiny recording device provided by Daniel, Marcus would sneak close enough to eavesdrop on the meeting without being detected. It was risky. If caught, Marcus risked losing his career and possibly facing criminal charges, but he didn't hesitate. This was about protecting his family and standing up for what was right. The two men waited patiently, watching as officers came and went through the back entrance. Finally, they spotted their chance when a delivery truck pulled up, distracting the security guard stationed outside. Taking advantage of the moment, Marcus slipped inside, keeping low and sticking to the darker corners of the hallway. His heart pounded as he moved silently, careful not to make a sound. He reached the door of the meeting room just as voices drifted through the crack beneath it. Slowly, Marcus positioned the recording device against the wall, ensuring it captured every word clearly. Then he retreated quickly, retracing his steps until he rejoined Daniel in the alley. Back at home, Marcus listened to the recording with a mix of anger and satisfaction. The conversation confirmed everything he had suspected. Senior officers openly admitted to covering up complaints against Parker, dismissing them as minor issues, or blaming the victims. One officer even joked about how easy it was to manipulate the system. The arrogance in their voices made Marcus's blood boil. With this new evidence in hand, Marcus turned to Rachel Monroe for help. Together, they strategized how best to use the recordings to maximize impact. Rachel suggested releasing the audio clips alongside her next article, which would focus on the culture of corruption within the department. She warned Marcus that going public with such sensitive material could put him in danger, but he didn't care. Justice mattered more than his safety. When Rachel's article dropped, the response was explosive. Headlined, "Voices of Corruption," it included excerpts from the leaked recordings, along with detailed analysis of the systemic issues plaguing law enforcement. Readers were shocked and outraged. Social media erupted with calls for immediate action, and protests intensified nationwide. Politicians who had previously stayed silent now scrambled to condemn the behavior exposed in the report. Under mounting pressure, federal authorities stepped in, launching a full-scale investigation into the department. Arrest warrants were issued for several high-ranking officials implicated in the cover-ups, including the police chief. For the first time, it seemed like real accountability might actually happen, but as the spotlight grew brighter, so did the risks. Threats against Marcus and his family escalated. Anonymous callers left chilling messages on their voicemail, warning them to stop digging or face consequences. One night, someone threw a brick through their living room window, shattering glass everywhere. Elena and the kids huddled together in fear, while Marcus stood guard, gripping a baseball bat tightly. Despite the danger, Marcus refused to back down. He installed additional security measures around the house, including cameras and motion sensors. He also taught Elena basic self-defense techniques, ensuring she knew how to protect herself if needed. Still, the constant threat weighed heavily on everyone, especially the children. Mia and Noah became quieter, clinging to their parents more than usual. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, Elena confronted Marcus about the toll this fight was taking. "Is it worth it?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "All this stress, all this danger, and what if something happens to you or to us?" Marcus sighed deeply, running a hand over his face. He understood her fears. They mirrored his own. But he also believed deeply in the importance of what they were. "I can't promise it won't be hard," he admitted. "But if we don't stand up now, nothing will change. We're fighting for our kids' future, Elena. For everyone who deserves better." Elena nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't fully agree with his methods, but she respected his determination. More importantly, she trusted him. Together they vowed to keep pushing forward no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Rachel continued amplifying their message, writing follow-up articles that highlighted stories of other victims abused by the system. Her work inspired others to come forward, sharing their experiences and demanding reform. Slowly but surely, a movement began to take shape. A grassroots effort aimed at dismantling institutional racism and abuse of power. Marcus played a key role in this movement, using his platform as a former U.S. Marshal to speak out publicly. He attended rallies, gave interviews, and testified before local government committees about the need for transparency and accountability in policing. His words resonated deeply with audiences, earning him both praise and criticism. Some viewed him as a hero, a symbol of resistance against injustice. Others labeled him reckless, accusing him of betraying his oath as an officer. But Marcus didn't care about the labels. He cared about results. Every speech he gave, every interview he did, brought them closer to meaningful change. By the end of the month, federal investigators had arrested several senior officers, including the police chief. Officer Greg Parker, too, found himself behind bars, charged with multiple counts of misconduct and assault. For the first time in years, justice seemed possible. Not just for Elena, but for countless others who had suffered in silence. Yet even as victories piled up, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their battle was far from over, changing. A broken system required more than arrests. It required rebuilding trust, implementing reforms, and fostering accountability. That kind of progress wouldn't happen overnight. Still, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet hope. As he sat on the porch with Elena, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, he felt a sense of peace. They had faced unimaginable challenges, but they had stood strong together. No matter what lay ahead, they would continue fighting. For justice, for equality, and for a brighter future. The arrests of Officer Greg Parker and several senior police officers sent shockwaves through the nation. For years, these individuals had operated with impunity, shielded by layers of corruption and indifference. But now, thanks to Marcus's relentless pursuit of justice, they were finally being held accountable. However, the fight was far from over. Legal proceedings would take time, and the road ahead promised to be fraught with challenges. As the trial preparations began, Marcus found himself thrust into the spotlight once again. Lawyers, journalists, and activists sought his input, eager to hear firsthand how the system had failed and how it could be fixed. Despite the pressure, Marcus remained focused on one goal: ensuring that no stone was left unturned. This wasn't just about punishing those responsible. It was about creating lasting change. One day, Marcus received a call from Rachel Monroe, the journalist who had been instrumental in amplifying their story. She informed him that federal authorities wanted him to testify before Congress about systemic issues within law enforcement. At first, Marcus hesitated. Testifying meant putting himself under intense scrutiny, not only from lawmakers but also from critics who still questioned his motives. Yet, after consulting with Elena, he agreed. If sharing his experience could help prevent others from suffering as they had, then it was worth it. The day of the testimony arrived, and Marcus dressed carefully, wanting to present himself as both professional and approachable. As he walked into the crowded hearing room, he felt a mix of nerves and resolve. Reporters snapped photos and whispers echoed around him. Seated behind him were Elena and the kids, offering silent support. Even though Mia and Noah didn't fully understand everything happening, they knew their dad was doing something important. When Marcus took the stand, the room fell silent. He began speaking slowly, choosing his words carefully. "My name is Marcus Carter," he said, his voice steady. "I'm a husband, a father, and a former U.S. Marshal. What happened to my family wasn't unique. It happens every day across this country, to people who don't have a voice, who are ignored or dismissed because of their race." He went on to describe the assault on Elena, the department's refusal to act, and the lengths he'd gone to uncover the truth. His words painted a vivid picture of institutional failure, leaving many in the audience visibly moved. Lawmakers listened intently, some nodding in agreement while others scribbled notes furiously. By the end of his statement, even the harshest skeptics seemed unable to deny the urgency of the issue. Afterward, media outlets covered Marcus's testimony extensively, praising his courage and calling for sweeping reforms. Public opinion shifted, further in favor of accountability, with petitions demanding policy changes gathering millions of signatures. Politicians, eager to align themselves with the growing movement, introduced bills aimed at increasing transparency and oversight in policing practices. While the momentum was encouraging, Marcus knew real change wouldn't come easily. Implementing reforms required navigating complex political landscapes and overcoming resistance from entrenched power structures. To address this, he partnered with grassroots organizations, attending community meetings and speaking directly with citizens about what meaningful reform should look like. One evening, during a town hall event, Marcus shared the stage with other advocates, including victims of police misconduct and families seeking justice for loved ones lost to systemic violence. Their stories were heartbreaking but powerful, underscoring the need for action. Marcus listened intently, taking mental notes on how best to amplify their voices. Back home, life remained challenging. Threats continued to pour in, forcing Marcus and Elena to maintain heightened security measures. Though exhausted, they tried to keep things normal for Mia and Noah, encouraging them to focus on school and hobbies. Still, the stress showed. Mia often clung to her parents more than usual, while Noah became quieter, retreating into books and games instead of playing outside with friends. Elena worried constantly about Marcus's safety. One night, after another threatening letter arrived, she confronted him again. "You've done so much already," she pleaded. "Isn't it someone else's turn to carry this burden?" Marcus sighed, pulling her close. "It shouldn't have to be this way," he admitted. "But until we fix the system, there will always be someone else fighting the same battle. I can't walk away, not when we're so close." Elena nodded, reluctantly, understanding his perspective even if she didn't fully agree. Together they leaned on each other, drawing strength from their shared commitment to justice. As weeks turned into months, progress became evident. Several cities implemented pilot programs aimed at improving police-community relations, such as body cameras, civilian review boards, and de-escalation training. Activists credited Marcus's efforts for inspiring these changes, hailing him as a catalyst for reform. Meanwhile, the trials of Officer Parker and his accomplices moved forward. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, including the leaked recordings and witness testimonies. Defense attorneys argued vehemently, attempting to discredit the sources and downplay the severity of the charges. But the weight of public opinion made it clear that excuses wouldn't suffice this time. During closing arguments, the prosecutor delivered a passionate speech. "This case isn't just about one officer. It's about a culture of abuse and impunity that has plagued our society for too long. Today we have the opportunity to send a message. No one is above the law." When the verdicts were announced, justice prevailed. Officer Parker was convicted on multiple counts, including assault and civil rights violations. Senior officers involved in the cover-ups received harsh sentences as well. Cheers erupted outside the courthouse as news spread, with crowds celebrating the hard-won victory. For Marcus and his family, the convictions brought a sense of closure, but not complacency. They knew the work wasn't finished. Systemic issues ran deep, requiring sustained effort to dismantle completely. Still, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of pride. Looking around at the cheering crowd, he saw hope, a belief that change was possible when people stood together. That evening, Marcus joined Elena and the kids on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "We did good," Elena said, softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "We're just getting started," Marcus replied with a smile. "There's still so much to do." And with that, they sat quietly, enjoying the peace of the moment while preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. Their journey had shaken the nation, but it had also planted seeds of lasting change, proving that even in darkness, light could prevail. The convictions of Officer Greg Parker and the senior officers marked a turning point, not just for Marcus and his family, but for communities across the nation. People celebrated the verdicts as proof that justice could prevail, even against powerful systems designed to protect wrongdoing. Yet for Marcus, the victory felt bittersweet. While accountability had been achieved, the cost of his fight weighed heavily on him, and on those he loved most. Marcus's once stellar career as a U.S. Marshal had suffered irreparable damage. His unorthodox methods, including infiltrating private meetings and leaking sensitive recordings, drew criticism from colleagues who viewed his actions as reckless. Some labeled him a vigilante, questioning whether his ends justified the means. Others accused him of betraying the very principles he had sworn to uphold. Despite public admiration, Marcus knew he would never return to the life he once led. Elena tried to reassure him, reminding him of the lives they had touched and the changes they had inspired. "You did what you had to do," she said one evening, as they sat together on the porch. "No one can take that away from you." But Marcus struggled to find peace. He replayed moments in his mind, the late-night planning sessions, the risks he took, the fear etched on Elena's face when threats poured in. Had it all been worth it? Yes, they had exposed corruption and brought attention to systemic issues. But at what price? His family had endured months of stress and danger, and the scars, both visible and invisible, would linger long after the headlines faded. Tensions between Marcus and Elena grew during this time. She worried about his obsession with continuing the fight, fearing it might consume him entirely. "We've done enough," she told him one night after another restless argument. "Isn't it time to focus on healing for us, for the kids?" Marcus understood her concerns, but stepping back felt impossible. Every news story about police misconduct or racial injustice reignited his determination. He couldn't ignore the fact that while they had won a battle, the war against systemic racism and abuse of power was far from over. Still, he promised Elena he would try to balance his activism with their family's well-being. To help bridge the gap, Marcus began shifting his focus toward mentoring young activists. Many of them reached out to him after hearing his story, seeking guidance on how to advocate for justice without losing themselves in the process. At first, Marcus hesitated, unsure if he was qualified to offer advice, but seeing the passion and hope in these young voices reminded him of why he started this journey in the first place. One such activist was a college student named Jamal, who organized protests in his hometown after witnessing police brutality firsthand. When Jamal emailed Marcus asking for tips on staying safe while organizing demonstrations, Marcus responded immediately. They began meeting regularly, discussing strategies for building coalitions, engaging policymakers, and amplifying marginalized voices. Through these conversations, Marcus found renewed purpose, not as a lone crusader, but as part of a broader movement. Rachel Monroe also played a crucial role in keeping the momentum alive. Her articles continued shining a light on systemic issues within law enforcement, inspiring readers to demand accountability. Together, she and Marcus launched a grassroots campaign aimed at educating citizens about their rights and empowering them to hold authorities accountable. They traveled to different cities, hosting workshops and speaking at community events. Everywhere they went, people greeted them with gratitude and enthusiasm. Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Resistance from entrenched power structures remained strong, and some reforms faced fierce opposition. Politicians argued over funding allocations, unions defended problematic practices, and critics dismissed calls for change as unrealistic or unnecessary. It was clear that dismantling decades of institutionalized injustice would require patience and persistence. At home, Marcus worked hard to rebuild trust with Elena and the kids. He spent more time playing with Mia and Noah, teaching them how to ride bikes and helping them with school projects. On weekends, the family went on picnics or visited local parks, cherishing moments of normalcy. Slowly, laughter returned to their household, easing some of the lingering tension. Still, reminders of the past lingered. Threats occasionally resurfaced, forcing Marcus to remain vigilant. One night, someone spray-painted hateful messages on their garage door. Instead of letting it break them, Marcus and Elena cleaned it up together, turning the act of erasing the graffiti into a symbolic gesture of resilience. They refused to let hate define them. As months passed, Marcus began reflecting on his journey. He realized that true justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoers, it was about creating spaces where everyone could thrive. With this in mind, he partnered with local organizations to establish programs aimed at fostering dialogue between police departments and the communities they served. These initiatives included training sessions on cultural sensitivity, forums for sharing experiences, and collaborative efforts to address systemic inequities. The work was slow and often frustrating, but Marcus saw glimpses of hope. Officers who initially resisted the programs gradually opened up, sharing honest reflections about their struggles and biases. Community members, too, expressed willingness to engage constructively rather than resorting to anger or mistrust. Though small, these steps represented meaningful progress. One particularly poignant moment came during a community forum where Marcus spoke alongside a retired police captain named Robert Ellis. Once skeptical of reform efforts, Robert had since become an ally, advocating for transparency and accountability within law enforcement. As they shared the stage discussing ways to bridge divides and build mutual respect, the audience erupted in applause. For Marcus, it was a reminder that change was possible, even among those who seemed least likely to embrace it. By the end of the year, the impact of Marcus's efforts became undeniable. Cities nationwide adopted policies inspired by the reforms he championed, ranging from stricter oversight mechanisms to increased funding for community-based solutions. Activists credited him with sparking a national conversation about policing and equity, hailing him as a catalyst for transformation. Yet through it all, Marcus remained humble. He knew he hadn't done it alone. Countless individuals, Elena, Rachel, Daniel, Jamal, and countless others, had contributed to the movement in their own ways. Each voice mattered, each action counted. On New Year's Eve, Marcus stood on the porch with Elena and the kids, watching fireworks light up the sky. The air was cold, but warmth radiated from their closeness. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked, leaning into him. "Everything we've been through," Marcus replied, softly, "and everything still ahead." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "We'll face it together." In that moment, surrounded by love and hope, Marcus allowed himself to feel proud, not just of what they had accomplished, but of the legacy they were building. Their fight had shaken the nation, but it had also planted seeds of lasting change, proving that even in darkness, light could prevail. Months turned into years, and life began to settle into a new rhythm for Marcus, Elena, and their family. The scars of the past never fully disappeared. How could they? But time softened their edges, allowing healing to take root. What once felt like an unending storm now seemed more like a distant memory, a chapter in their lives that had shaped them but no longer defined them. The nation continued to grapple with the issues Marcus and his allies had brought to light. Reforms were implemented slowly, city by city, department by department. Some changes came easily, others faced fierce resistance. Yet, the momentum sparked by their fight persisted. Communities across the country rallied behind calls for justice, demanding accountability and transparency from those in power. Activists inspired by Marcus's story kept pushing forward, refusing to let the movement lose steam. For Marcus, stepping back from the limelight allowed him to focus on what truly mattered: his family. He spent more time at home, helping Elena with household chores, attending school events for Mia and Noah, and simply enjoying quiet moments together. Though he still mentored young activists and occasionally spoke at community forums, these activities became less about personal vindication and more about fostering a collective effort toward lasting change. One day, while walking through the park with Elena, Marcus noticed something remarkable. Parents of all races sat together on benches watching their kids play soccer. Officers patrolled leisurely, chatting with residents instead of standing apart with stern expressions. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable, a shift in how people interacted with one another. Trust was rebuilding, piece by piece. Marcus smiled faintly, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He knew this harmony hadn't happened overnight. It was the result of countless conversations, protests, policy changes, and courageous acts by ordinary citizens willing to stand up for what was right. And though challenges remained, the progress gave him hope. At home, Elena noticed the change in Marcus too. The tension that once clouded his eyes had eased, replaced by a quiet confidence. She saw it when he played catch with Noah or helped Mia practice her spelling words. His laughter returned, fuller and freer than before. For so long she had feared losing him, not just physically but emotionally, to the weight of his mission. Now she realized he hadn't been lost after all. He had simply needed time to find balance again. One evening, as they tucked the kids into bed, Elena turned to Marcus. "Do you ever think about writing your story?" she asked softly. "People should know everything we went through, not just the victories, but the struggles too." Marcus hesitated, considering her words. Writing a book wasn't something he'd ever imagined doing, but the idea resonated with him. If sharing their journey could inspire even one person to keep fighting for justice, then maybe it was worth it. Over the next several months, Marcus began working on the project. With Elena's encouragement, he wrote candidly about their experiences, the fear, the anger, the triumphs, and the sacrifices. He included stories from others who had joined the movement, highlighting the strength of collective action. Rachel Monroe offered to edit the manuscript, ensuring it reached its full potential. When the book was finally published, it quickly gained attention. Titled "Shaking the Foundations: A Fight for Justice," it became a bestseller, sparking discussions. In classrooms, book clubs, and community centers nationwide, readers praised Marcus's honesty and vulnerability, calling the book a powerful reminder of the importance of perseverance in the face of injustice. Through the book's success, Marcus found himself invited to speak at universities, conferences, and civic organizations. Unlike before, however, these appearances didn't feel like obligations. They felt like opportunities. He used his platform not to glorify himself, but to amplify voices still struggling to be heard. Whether addressing students or senior citizens, he always ended his talks with the same message: change starts with you. Don't wait for someone else to lead. Be the leader your community needs. As the years passed, Marcus and Elena watched their children grow into compassionate, confident individuals. Mia developed a passion for art, using her creativity to design posters for local marches and fundraisers. Noah loved science and dreamed of becoming an engineer, often talking about building better infrastructure for underserved neighborhoods. Both kids carried a strong sense of justice, instilled in them by their parents' example. In the community, Marcus and Elena became pillars of support. They hosted annual Unity Days, bringing neighbors together for food, music, and workshops, focused on collaboration and understanding. These events fostered connections between people who might otherwise never have crossed paths, breaking down barriers one conversation at a time. One Unity Day, as Marcus stood on a small stage thanking volunteers, he spotted Officer Robert Ellis in the crowd. Once a skeptic of reform, Robert had transformed into an advocate for positive change within law enforcement. After retiring, he dedicated his time to training new officers on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. Seeing him there, smiling and clapping along with everyone else, filled Marcus with pride. After the event, Marcus approached Robert. "Thank you for coming," he said warmly, shaking the older man's hand. "Thank you," Robert replied, his voice sincere. "You reminded me and a lot of us that it's never too late to do the right thing." Those words stayed with Marcus long after the crowd dispersed. They served as a reminder that change wasn't linear or perfect, but it was possible. Every step forward, no matter how small, mattered. As the sun set that evening, Marcus and Elena walked home together, holding hands. The streets were quiet, lit only by the soft glow of porch lights and the occasional passing car. Ahead of them, Mia and Noah skipped happily, pointing out constellations beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Marcus glanced at Elena, feeling a surge of gratitude. They had faced unimaginable challenges, yet here they were, stronger, closer, and more hopeful than ever. Their fight had shaken the nation, but it had also planted seeds of lasting change, proving that even in darkness, light could prevail. "We did good," Elena whispered, echoing words she'd said years ago. Marcus nodded, squeezing her hand. "And we'll keep doing good for as long as it takes." Together, they stepped onto their porch, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Behind them, the neighborhood buzzed with life, a testament to the power of courage, resilience, and unity. Their journey had been difficult, but it had also been beautiful. A reminder that love, determination, and justice could transform not just a family but an entire nation.